Latinos today are about $4.2 trillion GDP, US Latinos. That's the fifth largest economy on the planet. Literally. There's only 4 countries bigger than US Latinos.
Right.
And the US Latino GDP is growing much faster than the overall US GDP. So there's already this big economic impact that's growing. When it comes to entrepreneurship, Latinos have today about 5 to 6 million businesses, which is a big number. But the real important thing, or like the fascinating thing, is that it's growing very fast. Like we compared a period of, I want to say, a 5-year, 6-year period. The last 5 or 6 years, the number of Latino firms grew by 40%.
Okay.
The number of white-owned firms declined by 3% in that same period.
Wow.
So again, if it were not for Latinos, the number of companies in the country would be flat to down, right?
And so would have been for now half a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you see, like these aren't future. This is like happening already.
Yeah.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back. Or maybe it's your first time with us. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not remember, this is the show where I get the absolute privilege to have weekly conversations with the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers, I call them, across all sectors and segments of society and industry, as we very aspirationally come together in this conversation to try to leave the world a little bit better than we found it before this. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Arturo Cázares, who is the CEO of the Latino Business Action Network, or more affectionately known as LBAN, which is probably what I will slip into calling it as we get into the deepness of the episode. So let me tell you a little bit about Arturo before we welcome him into the show and get a chance to meet him today. So in my personal opinion, having researched and prepared for the show, I think Arturo is the living embodiment of one aspect of what we used to call the American dream. And he is living a life to empower others to dream their dreams now as well. He didn't just climb the corporate ladder. He decided to dedicate a part of his life in service of others, helping them to create and climb their own ladders maybe more effectively. From working in the fields of California's Central Valley, which is, of course, our nation's richest agricultural engine, as a child immigrant from rural Mexico, to helping grow and then lead some of the multi-billion-dollar global companies that our present world is built upon. And for guys my age, Arturo's professional CV story runs parallel to my tech industry timeline. And I'll tell you, he has worked at some of the giants. But for about 5 years now or so, he has served as the CEO of this LBAN community, of the Latino Business Action Network, in partnership with Stanford University, where they are helping very purposefully and programmatically to encourage and empower generations of Latino business owners and leaders, executives and entrepreneurs to build their own better lives and build better companies and communities across the Americas in the process. His own story has lived at the intersection of grit and scale and opportunity and purpose. He's a Stanford engineer and a Stanford GSB MBA graduate. He has led, as we talked about, thousands of employees across the world and now partners with the best and brightest at Stanford to help unlock the economic power of Latino entrepreneurship across the Americas, which he's going to teach us a lot about today. Under his leadership, LBAN has built one of the most influential economic engines and communities for Latino business owners today. And today's conversation hopefully isn't just a story about business growth or entrepreneurship. Ideally, I hope it's really a conversation in which we learn how to think more entrepreneurially about identity, about opportunity, and about growth. And maybe through the process, we learn how to redefine who gets the opportunity to build the future. So with all that said, welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Arturo. It's great to meet you.
Well, it's great to be here, Rob. I truly enjoyed this opportunity, so I'm looking forward to it. Guess we can just jump right into it.
We can jump right in as well. So first things first, I talked about it a little bit in your bio, and so I'm curious, give us a little bit of a insight into your thinking. Why become the CEO of LBAN in 2021? Why decide after your illustrious professional career to dedicate this next chapter of your career to helping others build and not just to help yourself build?
Yeah, no, I'll try to keep it short. It is rather sort of long in terms of the journey. I'm a few decades old now, so um, but I guess as you pointed out, I'm a child immigrant. My parents had maybe 2 years of grade school. That's why we left Mexico. They wanted better for us. But growing up in the Central Valley of California, it was rough. Not just working in the fields, and we had to do that just to survive. But also, it was sometimes it could get violent. There was a lot of extreme poverty, racial tension, even in the schools and in the neighborhood. So it was quite kind of an extreme situation.
Yeah.
For me, it was all about, okay, how do I get out of this? Like, America has to be better. Like, I just knew it had to be better.
This can't be it, right?
Exactly. We didn't give up. I mean, not that we give up a lot in the sense that, but still,
we didn't leave home to come to
exactly. I mean, there was family and all that you're not around, and so you're kind of, you have to. It's kind of that immigrant story where you have to rationalize something better, like, because you say, well, I have to make this a good trade-off, right?
Yep.
And also the obligation to your parents, like, they gave up a lot, so you had to. And so the first sort of phase of that was just, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I escape this environment and get better? And me and my brothers and sisters, we all saw education as that path.
Okay.
And so we dedicate ourselves to that. For me, that was Stanford. It was transformational. I was lucky to go there. I just enjoyed it. At first, you're just trying to figure out how you survive and how you get to the next step, because that was,
sure,
your whole identity revolved around just, how do I stay, how do I not have to, get kicked out or whatever. Like, it's everything. And how did I get kicked out of Stanford? How did I get kicked out of the country? I mean,
right.
You're always just trying to hold on with your fingernails. Eventually, as you make progress, and I soaked up Stanford. It was transformational for me, like the whole experience. And they teach you at the business school how to go be master of the universe. And I did that. I loved it. Like, I was, you're kind of alluding to it. I was living in Europe for a while. I had thousands of employees. You're doing that kind of thing, and
living that executive dream, right?
Exactly, and it's mind blowing. It really is. I just thought, well, okay, this is it. But throughout that whole journey, was always thinking that was wrong. Like, that was wrong. Like, what I left. Like, not that I left, but that I had to leave. Like
right.
That was wrong. And this country that I've chosen to be a part of has to be better than that. Like, we're giving up too much, right? Because there was many other kids in those fields were equally deserving.
Sure.
Like, just completely honest about that. Like, I was lucky. My brothers and sisters, and we worked hard. My parents made sacrifices, but many Americans do that. Many millions of Americans do that. And somehow there's just things in the environment that don't work out for them. And so my thought was always, how do I change that? Your first order is, how do you deal with the most basic things? And so, I would always contribute. I was always open doors for people, even as I would hire people and promote people. I was thinking about, okay, what's their potential? Let me not get so obsessed over the exact pedigree, but if I really can get to their potential, that's going to be more proof of their future than, whatever pedigree they might have, because that might be more of an indication of their birth, status than anything else.
Right.
So how do you really understand that in any human that you're talking to, and also it helps you understand how you contribute the most to them. If you really understand who they are, where they've come from, you could also then work with them better, and you get a lot more out of a team by having that mindset. When I was a student at Stanford Business School, Professor Porras was the only Latino professor. Okay. And so obviously we connected because there weren't that many of us there. And I went off and did my thing, after Stanford. He wrote the book Built to Last. He did a lot of, his name was pretty big back in the day, right?
Yep.
I'm talking like the 90s, right? Where that book was top of the, bestsellers. He was going all over the world talking about.
I read that book in the 90s. Yes,
exactly.
a much younger version of myself.
So when he retired from Stanford, he had the idea for LBAN. And he reached out to several of his former students. I was, one of those. Several others helped a lot for him to get LBAN going. but I was volunteering throughout that process, kind of, and I loved the idea. Like the idea just resonated, but I was still doing my thing, right? You're
Yeah.
out, but eventually, after the organization got going and it looked like they were, had the ability to scale, they still were struggling because it's a small nonprofit. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to kind of do this?" And
Okay.
I thought, yeah, of course. Like it's my time now. Like it was the right time for me. Maybe earlier I wouldn't have been, but now was the right time. I felt like I had the experience. And also it was where you get to that stage where now it's really about giving back. And how do you really try to solve it at scale? This original thing, like, this is my chosen country. How do I make it like, not like it's anything different? Like America, I think the idea is just the most powerful thing. You just kind of the conceptual thing.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. The reality.
Our current
Yeah.
form, the idea might be the better version of us than the current form is. Yeah.
Exactly. And you could look at throughout our history, we've had phases where we haven't, for many Americans, they haven't been able to fully participate.
Right.
But we always had that.
I always say, sorry to interrupt. I always say, like, it's my favorite line of the preamble in the Constitution is the pursuit of the more perfect union.
Exactly. Right?
Because to me, that combined with we the people being the second favorite line of mine, but that idea that we have always been imperfect and we will always be imperfect. But to your point, we are endowed with this aspirational nature to try to be better.
Exactly. And that aspiration is a very, like, it's progress. It's pointing to progress. Like there's nothing more American than trying to make progress. Yeah. And so my thought was, okay, how do I now do that on a more systemic level? Because I was always volunteering, I was always donating, but now and I thought, okay, LBAN is a way that I can now do that. Plus, it's also a way to give back to Stanford in a way, right? Because, it was very transformational for me, right? One thing that I told, one of the leaders in previous for the university, when I was talking to him about LBAN several years ago, I said, so I know that the university gets donations of $100 million plus, right? I mean, they get about $1 billion a year, something crazy number, right?
Yeah, big endowment.
Exactly. So I said, I know you get donations that are easily 100 million plus from like one individual, but what this is going to be will become your biggest gift.
Nice.
It will be your biggest gift because it's going to connect you to this community that is really going to be uplifting for the whole country and all institutions. Everyone will want to be a part of this.
And multi-generational, almost evergreen, right? I mean, because I would assume building what you're building intentionally, the way you and your teams are, like, you're doing it in a way to have it definitely outlast you.
100%. And as I tell Professor Porras, he was a true visionary. A true visionary is someone who builds a foundation and builds a foundation so strong that you could build this powerful house on it. But it's a house he will never inhabit, and even I won't fully inhabit it. Nope. So it's all for that future, right? You have to be toiling at this thing for years without ever really seeing any, ratification that this.
But to your point, right? But taking your gratification and validation out of the small incremental areas of progress, which sometimes incremental means literally tiny, and sometimes incremental means significant, almost exponential. But it's still like only in a period of time, because over the swath of, say, I always talk about things and I'm a bit of an outlier in this sense. I always talk about things in the swath of like the next 50 to 100 years. Right? Exactly. And yeah, that's
and to your point, those little things for us aren't that little, because we could see people like when they come, they come in contact with this ecosystem that we're building. It is you could see like they're ratifying it for us, right? And we could see that, okay, the power is only going to grow bigger and bigger.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do me a favor here. Help me. I'm going to ask you a couple times to kind of almost act as like a Sherpa for some data about the broader economy in this context. And then we're also obviously going to talk much more about LBAN. But for now, first things first, let's kind of provide a baseline of context for some folks who maybe are not aware of the power and economic uniqueness of, say, the what I'll call kind of the Latino entrepreneurial economy. So I'm curious, like, first question, like if we collectively, as the United States, is the way you've just framed it, truly unlocked like Latino entrepreneurship at scale, what would change economically or culturally? And then maybe the subtext of that question is like, why does that matter to everybody, not just to Latinos? We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney & Company. You know, we all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney & Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney & Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com, that's HaneyCPAs.com, to learn how they can support your business's financial journey.
Exactly. And so I should say too that our research, it focuses on Latinos, and we also research white business owners in the U.S. As a comparison group. We just for lack of resources, we're not able to look deeply into like African American, Asian Americans.
Every group, sure.
But we figured, okay, those two, it gives us a lot of experience with this community that is very dynamic and is having an increasing impact on the country. Also, all of our programs are open to everyone. All of our events, all of our programs, race, ethnicity, doesn't matter. We're 100% open to everyone, and everything works for everyone, right? Because we're focused on helping people grow their business, and we're focused on the American economy writ large. The other thing is that we are focused on the U.S. Again, because of resources, eventually, there's a great, we can see this hemispheric opportunity. And already we have a lot of people coming here wanting to be a part of this. And so we're trying to find ways to accommodate that within the scope of what we have, which is a lot of demand for this just from this country, right? So, but just to kind of back up, it's important when we think about the U.S. Latino population. A lot of people know that it's big and growing. Like that's pretty obvious to everyone.
Sure.
And some people use that in a negative way, right? To kind of fearmonger or whatever.
100%. We're not going to focus on those people today. We're going to focus on the forward thinkers.
Exactly. And the way I say it too is that there's nothing more intrinsically American than Latinos, in the sense that for many Latinos, their ancestry goes back before this was a country.
Literally. Right.
You think of these names, California, Texas, that was all.
And by the way, longtime listeners or viewers of this podcast know my stance on the Americas, right? As opposed to just the United States of America.
Exactly.
Right. So yes, thank you. But for this part of this context, we're talking about the economy of the United States of America.
Yeah. And we do have a broader vision, because we do see that what we do is hemispheric, while our focus is the U.S. right now.
Yeah.
And so then, it's the population is growing at a rapid rate. There's 68 million of us now. In 1980, there was probably something on the order of 14 million.
Wow.
And now, like within 30 years or so, there will be over 100 million. That's incontrovertible, inevitable, because of most of that growth is U.S. births, right? So it doesn't have to do with immigration. Now, immigration will accelerate that process. And the second growth factor, which multiplies on top of this first growth factor, is that Latinos are getting older. We're still the youngest population, but we're getting older. Again, back in 1980, our median age was a late stage adolescent or maybe early adult. Okay. So that meant more than half of our people, of this small population, could not really produce. Although some of us were working in the fields and things like that,
Right.
that wasn't really like a scalable way to grow your
Sure.
community. Now our median age is about 29. We're still the youngest, but at 29, a much greater percentage of this bigger population is now contributing and producing. So that is a second growth factor multiplied on top of the first. And there's a third growth factor that is our education levels are rapidly increasing.
Okay.
When we look at the data and we look at Latinos, they show the biggest increase when you compare the children to the parents of any group, right? And part of that is because we started with the least education. Like my parents had 2 years of grade school
Right.
in rural
The
Mexico.
baseline is set in such a way that then
It-
growth
it-
is like artificially fat or like, yeah.
Yeah, but it does point to something that with very little in this country, because often like we didn't have access to government, we weren't necessarily fully documented. So you didn't have access to a lot of things, right? That others have yet.
Sure.
Yet Latinos are still, even in those circumstances that are very extreme, privation, still find ways to create better lives for their children. And education is a huge focus of all Latinos. And so you see that in the stats. This is over 40 years. Every year, the stats are showing a big increase when you compare the children's level of education to the parents. And like in the last 20 years, the number of college Latinos graduating from college has more than tripled, which is much faster than our population growth. We haven't tripled in the last 20 years, but college-wise, we have, again, because we're getting older and because more education. And so,
Sure.
so the numbers are just, so what that means is those three things all add on top of each other to create this massive Latino tsunami that's permeating all aspects of the U.S. culture and economy. Right, because there's a lot more people now better educated and entering professions and driving, not just consumption, but production, right? And then I'll switch more to sort of the economic impact now. And again, a lot of this is based on our research that we do, and we've been doing this for 10, 11 years now. Every year we release a report. Latinos today are about $4.2 trillion GDP, US Latinos. That's the fifth largest economy on the planet. Like literally, there's only 4 countries bigger than US Latinos.
Right.
And the US Latino GDP is growing much faster than the overall US GDP. So this is just going to keep growing. So there's already this big economic impact that's growing. When it comes to entrepreneurship, Latinos have today about 5 to 6 million businesses, which is a big number. But the real important thing, or like the fascinating thing, is that it's growing very fast. Like we compared a period of, I want to say, a 5-year, 6-year period. The last 5 or 6 years, the number of Latino firms grew by 40%.
Okay.
The number of white-owned firms declined by 3% in that same period.
Wow.
So again, if it were not for Latinos, the number of companies in the country would be flat to down, right? And so
and would have been for now half a decade.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you see, like these aren't future. This is like happening already.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Latino companies overall are growing revenues 50% faster, and they're creating jobs at almost twice the rate of white-owned companies, right?
Okay.
And so, and right now there's also a lot of, because for the longest time, the economy from an entrepreneurial standpoint was driven by white men, who many of which are retiring. And so you have this big sort of demographic shift just happening. It was going to happen anyway because, after so many years of running a business, it gets tiring, right? You want to retire, and in some cases, the children don't want to take it over, or just other stuff happens, right? And so you see either consolidation or just less number of businesses, but Latinos are on the early part of that, so they're all coming into creating companies and filling in the growth, and so that's kind of the transition that you're seeing. Wow. The thing that's most fascinating to me is across the board, a job at a Latino-owned company offers better benefits on average. Yeah, and we can't prove why. We can show the data that says, okay, this is fact, right? We posit our theory is that a lot of Latinos come up from privation, And so when they create these companies, they're trying to create the kinds of jobs they would have wanted, or that,
Sure,
they,
right? Or maybe a bit more sensitized to it,
yeah.
right? And therefore a bit better boss in that context, right? Or a bit better business owner.
Yeah. And the other side of it probably has to do with Latinos really, community is a really powerful
Yeah,
thing for
yeah.
Latinos, right? And so that's kind of the context. And in terms of why this matters, um, there are challenges still impacting. So while this all looks great, right? You say, okay, what country would not want Latinos? And sometimes I wonder, like, do we really want? No,
Trust me.
we won't go there. But
Yeah.
because I'm not going, I'm
That's a
staying.
whole other other podcast.
Yeah, because I'm staying. But anyway, no, look, there are challenges that not just Latinos, but other non-traditional business owners, African American business owners, women business owners face.
Yep.
Access to capital, access to contracts. We have data around that too as it pertains to Latinos, but we know that that could be extrapolated to these other communities. When we quantify just the impact of the lost opportunity because Latinos aren't getting access to the right kinds of resources, we've quantified it at $1.1 trillion.
Of lost
Of
economic
loss.
activity
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
opportunity that again, the broader economy, all of us, no matter how we look or feel or where we're from, like all of us literally would benefit from if that economic activity was at play.
100%. And that's the way we look at it, is that this is a loss for society, right? It's obviously it's impacting Latinos, but this is a loss for society. And then when you consider, to address these challenges that Latinos are facing, a Latino business owner, it's not like you just solve it for Latinos. It's the same issues that you would by default solve it for African Americans and for women as well, right?
Effectively, any in old world language, like disenfranchised entrepreneurial subsector of the economy is disadvantaged and disenfranchised as it has been systemically or just individually biased against for decades.
We can't tell someone how to be a better banker or how to be a better VC or how to be a better corporate purchasing executive. And we would never profess to tell anyone that. All we can say is that there's money being left on the table. Like, if that's all you care about, like I do think, in addition to the economics of it, because I think making just the economic argument is insufficient. But the economic argument is clear. It's multi-trillion dollars when you compare Latinos, African Americans, women, and so many other groups. Because again, you deal with implicit bias, these kinds of things. Once you start to take that apart, it unlocks this for everyone, not just for Latinos. Yeah, and that's only good for the country. But the thing about that is, you're going to come to that at your own pace. Our hope is that happens sooner rather than later. And then we work with our community to the extent that we can about, okay, these are ways that you could start building your own ecosystem. These are one of the best ways, for example, to overcome these types of things is if you get a warm introduction to someone, like, for example, a banker or a VC trusts someone, that person makes the warm introduction, then that really addresses this issue of implicit bias. Also, once you have enough of these different kinds of people showing success, that also starts to take apart this question of implicit bias, right? And so we figure, okay, this is going to get solved. It has to, because too much is being left on the table. And then at the other side, I still think, despite the fact that it's not always, I guess, in these days, politically correct to talk about DE&I or things like ethics and morals, I think that's still incredibly important. And I think almost all humans respond to that. Totally. Everyone wants to do good, intrinsically.
100% true. I mean, I say it as a advocacy of this podcast, and the thesis behind what I'm trying to do here over 200 plus episodes now is literally, I just kind of look at it on my worst days when I look at the world spinning around us outside of us, and I just say, but the power of this and these people will outlast that. Right? It's almost not just demographically inevitable, as you say, but it is just historically, paradoxically inevitable that this goodness of people and people's desire to do good by others intrinsically over time, over long enough swaths of time. And that's part of the problem, right? Is we all have very short tempers and we have very short spans that we pay attention to things, and we want change that we want once we announce that we want it, right? Instead of realizing that, as I always say, some of these societal level problems that we have taken either hundreds or dozens and dozens of years to create, and generations to create, and it will take generations to unwind and do better, although with smarter people in better community and less leverage of smarter tools, we can shrink those time frames, but you're never going to go from solving a 75-year problem in a year. You're going to go from solving a 75-year problem maybe in 20 years. But that would be transformational when you look back historically.
Exactly. No, totally.
Okay, so I think you've answered this question, but I want to give you a chance to highlight it. We talked a little bit pre-show when we were getting settled in about this idea that, because I know a couple of folks or a handful of folks that have gone through the programs, and you emphasized that like people come in and they think they're going to learn one thing, and then they wound up walking out realizing they were empowered with something totally different. It sounds to me a little bit like LBAN is really kind of training, my language here, but training entrepreneurial thinkers, right? As much as we are narrowly training just entrepreneurs or executives, because what you just said is this idea that like we're training them to understand how to build upon these systems, how to collaborate in community, how to kind of think long term. And I'm like, oh, see, we're not just teaching them X's and O's and spreadsheets.
No, exactly right. And just to be clear, currently we have two programs. One for business owners who are already they're selling, and they might not have any equity investment, and they could be any kind of business. It might be, they own several restaurants, but people that are invoicing 1 million to in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars. And the program is to help them scale from wherever they are to bigger, but they have to be already at least at 1 million. And like I say, quite a few of them are well above that, because they need to have enough critical mass for the material to be more appropriate for them. But it's very much about them as leaders, and also them, and how do you think about innovation and creating growth on a different scale, right? Then we have another one for startups that are equity backed or are looking for equity, that are earlier stage. But it's a very similar length of program with slightly different content, because these are startups. But also it's very much about leadership, like you as a leader, and also about, the whole growth journey and how to think about that. In many cases, even for companies that are already like older or have more traction, we hear about quite a few pivots that happen where they change, right? Because now they got exposed to ideas, and sometimes the ideas don't come out of the classroom. We have Stanford professors, Stanford faculty that are part of this, and people who finish the program will get a certificate from the Graduate School of Business. But sometimes the idea comes just from them, like meaning from the others, like
from their peers, sure.
Yeah, exactly, because the other transformational aspect of it is their minds are being opened up to these ideas, but also the experience of being with all these business owners from across the country, which on one level, there's a lot of variety. Like there's not one prototypical, person but yet there's a commonality because they're all there for the same thing. And that brings them together, and they form, because they're still running their business and they're going through an intense program, because it's a lot. It's 9 weeks and you're doing a lot, and it's like herding cats, but we're after them to make sure that they don't get behind and all that kind of stuff. That going through something like that, it transforms you, right? Because these are the people you went through it with, so now you have this bond. But then we talk to them about the greater ecosystem. That the whole purpose, even when they're being recruited, is this idea that we want to create this ecosystem around you. And the first time they see that ecosystem is when they first arrive at the first reception. They're all together. They look around. They're the beginning of that, the nucleus of that. And in the 9 weeks, they experience each other for 9 weeks. And there's 75 in one cohort, 40 in the other cohort. And in some cases, we do the two cohorts together, but simultaneous. But they do kind of overlap sometimes where they commingle. And so it's this finite group for 9 weeks. And then when you graduate, you're part of the alumni group, which is already over 1,500. And we have events and stuff, either webinars or in-person things in different cities where they get to meet the other people from their city that went through the program.
Stay connected. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that whole thing they start to see, well, this is the ecosystem. Like, this is the real value, because I can talk to these people. We have, examples where someone comes through the program and they say, you made me meet with bankers. I had no interest because I didn't need any financing, but you made me meet with them. One guy I talked to, he talked to me about like owning real estate or buildings and my own warehouse and whatever. And now 3 years later, I had that need and I reconnected. And now I own, several, warehouses and got, help with all the financing and everything.
Yeah.
And it improved my operations because I didn't realize there was ways I could actually pay less owning it than if I was renting it and all that kind of stuff, right?
That's great.
And so it's stuff like we get many things that come back, that the ecosystem itself is the biggest value that they're getting. But I don't want to sell short Stanford because it's a crucial part of that transformation.
Yeah, and I've got a question about Stanford a little bit, and a couple of questions. Yeah. So I'll give you a chance to talk about it, because that's something I'm really curious about as well. Before we go on too far, because we've already kind of in pieces and parts piece together kind of what I call like your commercial, your chance to tell us the kind of the pitch story of LBAN. And just to frame this for everybody that's listening, right? So in his introductory bio and then in his opening statements, like, we understood the origin story of LBAN. So we know that, right? But, and you've already heard about some of the impact and a couple of the programs and how there are different programs. So let me hit you with a couple of the other curiosities around like the business of it that I want to satisfy. So, maybe like, big picture. So 1,500-ish alumni now. We know it's been around since 2013. Like, give us a couple of the other metrics of impact or success over this last decade and a little bit.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io.
Yeah, no, like now, like the number of employees that they have is measured into the many thousands, right? I think I was gonna say something like 55,000 employees that work for LBAN.
These alumnus
companies. Yeah. The invoicing, it's something like 11 billion a year or something. Awesome. like that, right? So but what I would say though is that the real metrics aren't those economic ones. It's more this the value of this ecosystem, because if we're doing it right, that's a better ecosystem for everyone. And, sure. And we have this exercise that we put them through when they're in the program, and also when we have chances when we see them afterwards in different reunion meetings, that we call giving circles. And at first I think it's kind of weird, but when they're in the program, we just break them up into groups of like 7 or 8. And the exercise is, okay, you all go around the circle and you all, like, what are 3 things you can contribute to another business owner in your circle? And you keep doing that until everyone in your circle has at least one thing. Like, your goal for the assignment is everyone's going to get something. And what we're trying to do is teach them the value of thinking about giving before taking, right?
Love that.
Because it's intrinsically what Latinos do at a community level. Like, you don't think, you're going to have the family gathering or the family picnic or whatever. And if your Tia Lupe lost her job, you don't say, oh, you're not invited. No, she has to be there because you're going to help her find another job, right? The
Right.
whole family will do that, right? Or friends of family and stuff. And so you're always thinking about how do you contribute first? And that's why Latino build good communities, right? That, just
100%. Yeah.
healthier communities because they're sort of thinking that way. I like to think that in part is because often, whether it's in this country and we're not eligible for a lot of like government programs or they're not accessible to us or if for documentation reasons, we don't have access to them. And also in our home countries, if we come from other countries, the governments there aren't looking out for us either, which is kind of why we're here, right? It's kind of why we come here. And so then you just have to do that. Like you learn that to get ahead, the family has to build community with those around them. And that's how you create opportunity is through these relationships. But yet here we lose a bit of that at the professional level because when you go to college or whatever, and then there's not enough Latinos or people who think that way. And you're taught also in college how to network in this other way, right? And it doesn't always work for us. I mean, I encourage you to be a part of every network. I don't want to tell Latinos don't. I want to encourage it. If you should, networks are valuable and people should intrinsically, especially in business, how do you get yourself into good networks and get connected to good people? That's always going to be good. I think that's just good in life, right? Mm-hmm. We find good people to be around and you're going to be better off because of that. But when we don't have those professional networks yet because we didn't have the critical mass.
Right. They're not as mature as some peer groups in the broader economy.
Exactly. Because there have been so few of us that were educated that are older for the number of kids that are coming out of college.
Right.
But now that's why I really encourage if you're at a corporation, be part of an employee infinity group or be part, if you're like LBAN, that's what we try to do is like for entrepreneurs, let's try to create this group. And we never do that at the exclusion of anyone. Like it's always open to everyone because that's when we're at our best.
Yep.
Right. And you see Latino gatherings, there's always people will show up, right? Because,
always.
The kid invites his friends and whatever, the daughter invites her. And so
I'm a 57-year-old guy with a half Mexican, half gringo daughter because I was the guy that got invited to a Latino party way back in the day. And there you go, met her mother and off we went. Right. So no, I can speak to that in a very personal way. Before we get off the LBAN kind of commercial for a second, it's a nonprofit. You alluded to that in one of your earlier answers, right? So help me understand kind of the business model behind it in the specific. So we understand it's a nonprofit. We know how that works. But like, who are its major benefactors? How is it that you generate the resources that you then need so that you can scale your program, so that you can do more research?
Yeah, exactly. So exactly for our programs, we charge a minimum amount that doesn't even cover a fraction of our cost. And we do that on purpose because we want to make everything accessible. Like if we do webinars, they're usually open to everyone. If we do a reception, we have to pay money. We'll charge like a nominal fee of $25, which is less than what it's going to cost us to put it on because just so we know who's showing up because if they pay $25, they're more likely to actually show up. And even for the programs that we do at Stanford, those are extremely, extremely accessible, right? It's ridiculously accessible when it comes to the price, but we do that on purpose. The way we're able to do that though is because we do have a lot of great sponsors. First, our alumni are increasingly now supporting us, donating back every year, but also we have a lot of financial services firms, corporations that are also increasingly supporting us. And I would say that, it literally is our only gating factor to expand, right? The more that we get, because we're nonprofit, so by definition, we can't keep the money. So the more that we get, the more that we're able to do. And we could add more, create bigger cohorts to, just do more of what we do. Because it can scale all kinds of ways, right? You could just, it's not hard to think about all the different ways.
We need the program needs one of those $100 million Stanford donors, right?
Yeah, and I was what I said, like we need McKinsey Scott kind of money.
Or just Mackenzie Scott, right? Literally,
Exactly.
just to randomly send you a check without calling you or knowing you at all. All right, so we've talked about how we got here. We've talked about what it is today. It's pillars, research, education, network. That's the three pillars that is throughout all your material. Everybody that I've known that's gone through it talks about the value of all three of these things. You've already illuminated some of the value of the research, how powerful that is to have knowledge. What's it look for? What's the next 10 years? What's it look like going ahead? What are your aspirations?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, we have a small team, so we're just trying to survive all the work that we have. But yeah, I think in terms of the future, like I said, it's eminently scalable. Probably the two sort of different vectors are, one is within the U.S. There are other communities that if we wanted to focus deeper, we could, with more resources, do that, and we would also look for partners in those communities, right? To be a part of that. And I think that just makes a stronger ecosystem for everyone anyway. The other one is there's other programs that we could do, like you could imagine executive trainings or something like that, right? That
Sure.
There could be a lot of leverage from the leadership kinds of things that we do. But then also this one that is very present because we see a lot of demand already is across the Americas.
Right. I was gonna ask you to talk about that a little bit because as I'm listening and I'm thinking back to a couple of the names, like two people in particular were people that went through the program in the last maybe year and a half or so, and it's two former mentees. One is a former friend, Fede Garcia from now Curable in Argentina, but then Daniela Carvalho from Colombia. But with her three sisters, but I think she was the only sister that decided to go through the program. But that started me to watch and curiously start thinking like, oh, okay, eventually are we going to have an LBAN partners up with, some university with Tec de Monterrey in Mexico or with Universidad de Chile in Santiago or something like that. And all of a sudden LBAN extension programs in LATAM start popping up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're totally open to that. I should say that Daniela was the first of the three sisters. All three of them have gone through.
Have all three? Okay, yeah. I lost track. I'm all three. Okay.
Yeah, they're great. They're beautiful people.
I first met Daniela when she was presenting the Biz Nation idea.
Yes.
In 2016 in Monterrey at Tec de Monterrey at one of their big events.
Okay. Yeah. No. They're like it's a full-blown thing. They're going strong.
Very much. That's awesome. Good for
Yeah.
them.
No, and so most of the people now that are based outside the U.S. or they have presence here, right?
Sure.
Like a lot of the work that Daniela and her sisters are doing is here in the U.S. now.
Yeah, and they went to college in the South in the U.S.
Exactly. And so that's been like the connection of how these people. But we know that there's a huge potential. But for us, like the partnership, it could be with the university. It also could be with other ecosystem builders in those countries.
Sure.
Because what we would need is someone to help build the ecosystem there. Because we're here.
Right.
And we can leverage a lot of what we do here and those concepts and ideas, but we would need someone on the ground to actually do that. And so that's one of the gating factors. But no matter what we do, whichever one of these paths we go on, we would always look for an ecosystem partner.
Sure.
Right.
Makes sense. Let's talk about Stanford. We mentioned it before. I want to give you a chance to talk about that relationship. We understand why it was born the way that it was born and where it was born, where it was born, right? But what is it about the uniqueness that you value so much between this relationship with LBAN and Stanford?
Yeah, like for me, like I said, it's personal and it's a way to give back to the university. It was transformative for me, and I do think I seriously think this is going to be a massive gift for them. But also, I think it can also help them even in the shorter term as they think about the potential and how they are making an impact. When I think about the mission and what we try to do, it's not that. In fact, it overlaps exactly with what the GSB is trying to do. I forget the motto, but they have a motto that talks about if you transform leaders, you transform organizations, and you transform the world. Right. And so that's exactly what we embody, is exactly that.
Yep.
And so there's a huge alignment in that. I also think for us, it's really great that Stanford is the leading business school, and they're so open to, their professors are very available. And I should clarify, I mean, I pay Stanford, right? But I do consider them like, this is their program too, right?
Yeah, sure.
And in the case of the research, it's absolutely done jointly. Like, there's a researchers on staff that they have, their faculty is involved in the research alongside of us, right? We're paying for parts of it. They're offsetting some costs on their side, but the normal costs they would have as a university, not any direct costs related to us.
Mm-hmm.
So as a nonprofit, we pay them for all of those costs related to us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it makes it very scalable, though. On the one hand, I'm very open to other universities, right? Because I do think that, and I think, Stanford collaborates with a bunch of universities as well, right? So they know that concept of, hey, so, again, while I have a very personal relationship there and fondness for the university, and it will always be probably special, right? Because that's our origin story, right? Professor Porras, when he retires, the whole idea was, how do we do something leveraging the power of the research, the power of the academics, the world-class academics, more broadly? And that's what we are now. And that now is scalable to other universities and other places.
Yeah, no, now that you've built out that superstructure, so to speak, and extrapolated the philosophies, right? So that you can see that that's stable and it can sustain itself. I'm curious, couple more questions before we get to our last little segment in a bit here. You've worked with, you talked about 1,500-ish, entrepreneurs and executives from a wide range of profiles and backgrounds. I'm curious, is there a narrative kind of in the culture of America that gets something wrong about like Latino business in America? Like, is there one narrative after working with all these thousands of people that you can point to and be like, yeah, see, that's the thing that almost everybody doesn't understand about Latino entrepreneurs or Latino executives?
Yeah, there's sort of two things that I think about. First of all, I don't think people obsess too much about Latino entrepreneurs, but to the extent that they do, they probably get a couple things wrong.
Just guys like you and I. That's just us and whoever's listening to my podcast.
Exactly. It's going to change now, right? Because we're doing this.
Exactly, of course.
So, yes, I think the one thing is that people see Latino businesses as small, and that is true. But I should clarify. Most businesses, more than 90% of all businesses in the country, are single proprietor. Like, this is of any ethnicity.
Exactly.
Like the overwhelming majority, 90+% are single proprietor.
Yeah. What isn't the number in the U.S. economy? It's something like 96.5% are true small businesses, like employees, like 10 employees or fewer.
Yes, exactly. And so then that is the reality of businesses. But it is true that Latinos don't have as many of the bigger businesses yet. Right. But that's mostly because of the time that Latinos have been doing this, because we do see Latinos scaling businesses. And like I say, some of them come into our program already at a couple $100 million, $500 million. So they're out there. And there's going to be more and more as time goes by. The other sort of thing, that misconception maybe that people have, is that Latinos aren't in tech. And it's actually not the case. Our research shows that Latinos over-index, in part maybe because we're younger, right? And tech is,
right, younger demographic, growing educational track,
yes,
and therefore more tech savvy, and also just a growing part of the population of the country.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And so then you see that like about 25-26% of all Latino firms are tech related. Yeah. And so that also points to one of the biggest gaps, which is less than 2% of the VC funding goes to Latinos, well under 2%.
Which is why I've had wonderful people on this show like Jenny Flores and Grace Lee and Cuco Vega and Pedro Crespo and so many others.
Exactly.
Who are helping us illuminate exactly that intersection and some of those obstacles.
Exactly, and all of which are part of our ecosystem, right? It's a really good group of people
good people.
addressing this. Yeah.
Yes. All right. I'm curious. You've worked everywhere. Your profile again looks like my experiences in many ways, right? Europe, the US, Asia, Latin America. You've worked inside these massive public and private companies. Are there a couple of maybe one or two or three kind of enduring leadership lessons from your experiences, from your career, that you are actively always trying to impart to every new participant that comes through LBAN?
Yeah, and so I don't know how good we are at imparting it, but in terms of, because I also think that people need to come to their own in their way, right?
Sure.
That, if frameworks are good and all that, but you should, I think, if people say, okay, this is like, what's the phrase that people use about, when like a framework is the trend that you're best practice.
Right.
Best practice is an also ran practice because everyone is going to do the best practice.
No, that's see, I'm not asking about Arturo's best practices. Yeah, I'm asking like Arturo's life experiences that you gathered in all those years. Yeah. Like, what are those things that every cohort, or maybe you've taken some key traits out of yourself and you try to embed them in the curriculum somehow?
100%. I think more in just like the way that I try to show up and the way that I think LBAN more broadly tries to show up. Values matter. Like thinking about your values, your true values, not just you put them on paper and say, yeah, we profess this, but what is it that you truly value? And a value is something, this is something like Professor Porras would teach at the business school. If it's something like a value can guide you when things are hard, there's going to be a hard decision. A value can guide you. But if, because it's hard, you compromise, then it's not really your value. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's easy to say, these are my values, but it's not until it gets hard that it is really your value. Because
that's when you get tested, right?
Yeah. But it's important to go through that, to think about that intellectually before you're in those moments, right? Because it helps you get grounded so that when you do confront those things, because they'll happen whenever, you can't just schedule it. It's just something's going to happen. And you want to be grounded in that. The other one is that relationships matter. And that's kind of trite, but it does. It's the ecosystem concept at a very personal level, right? The relationship that you have with people and how you show up for them matters. And you don't know when, but it will it will probably come back to you. And even if it doesn't come back to you, if you showed up for someone in a good way, I'd like to think that they're showing up for others in a good way, right? Because they'll remember, hey, someone did me a solid. I'm gonna.
They'll pay it forward principle, right?
Exactly, and I think having that in mind is always important, and the other one, which is probably a more tactical one, those other two get a little too airy-fairy sometimes, I think, for people. But on a more tactical level, because I've been in crisis, like where you are running something and you have a currency crash or you have whatever, and the whole world for your business is now upside down. Like you're facing a potential massive loss. You don't even know, okay, my whole world changed. How to even take one more step? And I think, I don't know how it's hard, but it's find a way to stay centered and stay focused, especially if you're the leader. Staying centered and staying focused in a crisis is probably, even if you don't know what else to do, it's probably the most important thing you could do for the rest of the team, right? Because if nothing else, you got to help guide the ship through that process.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype. Shore Capital is an early-stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid, iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks, though.
They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more. Yeah, I'm curious because I'm feeling this as I'm listening to you. Are some of these Arturo life leadership lessons? Is there a through line back to literal Arturo in the fields of the Central Valley back in the day? Like, I mean, it's fair to say, my assumption, I can't imagine that 8 or 9-year-old you like envisioned you today, right? But I am feeling like a strong connection between who you are now, who you've become, with maybe some of that, what you took away from those experiences, because those are hard experiences. That was adversity, like thrust upon you.
Yeah, I think the thing there, I would say, like when I didn't have like a construct, and my brain wasn't formed enough, even like the frontal lobe or other, to like process the world. I just remember thinking back then, this is wrong. Like this is just wrong, and even thinking and being frustrated. You get angry too. And I could see why sometimes, as teenagers, you start to then, the hormones kick in and you start to act out. And I was able to manage through that, right? I don't think I was like that, but I remember sometimes feeling anger and frustration. The frustration is like, this is wrong. And why are the adults allowing this? And I kept thinking that why, and I kept externalizing it to why are they letting this? Whether I was indirectly blaming my parents, even though I knew that they didn't create it, like they're going through it just like me, but or the schools or the administrators or whoever, like just why are they allowing
the system of of adulthood, basically, right?
Exactly. Why are these people but I remember even then, as a kid thinking, and what I liked about my dad, he was so old school. He was so terribly old school. But what was really cool about it is he didn't care to be my friend. He was supportive and all that, but his thing too was, you have to deal with the world as it is. And you have the power to deal with it as it is. And a lot of it is in your mind. And working in the fields, you have to train your mind, right? Because it's such a mindless job. But if you don't do it well, you don't eat. And so you have to like figure out a way, how do I do this? But then your mind starts to figure out how you're focusing. And so you're processing, a lot of introspection about yourself and about the world. And the one thing that came to me in all of that was, at one point, I'm going to make a difference. I will find a way to make a difference.
Okay.
And that's the one thing he told me at one point, where I was lashing out, and we don't do that with him because he was pretty like old school, but a whole lot. But he never wanted us to just blindly follow authority, even him. He wanted us to question it, because a lot of things he went through in his life were also wrong.
Sure.
Right. And so he knew that authorities could be very wrong, especially about people like us. And so he didn't ever want us to be, succumb to just, towing the line or whatever, and not processing for ourselves, does this make sense or not? And one time I was sort of expressed some frustration about like adults or something. And then he looks at me and then he says, I know you have a child's mind right now, and you just think you know all the answers. And I know you don't value anything I'm about to tell you, but the world is just a lot harder. And you're lucky that I'm keeping as much as I can of that harshness from you right now.
Okay. Wow.
And he says, but you will get older soon enough, and you will have to face these demons. And when he said that, I took it literally, like, okay, yes, I have to now start thinking about that. I will be an adult. And therefore, if I'm holding them accountable, I have to be now accountable. What world do I want for the next generation?
They're the through lines that I felt. I was hearing these through lines throughout your story and throughout the answers in the conversation, and I just kept thinking, like, again, yes, it's not a movie version of it, right? Where like 8-year-old you has this, aha, I see the future, right? But there's those principles. You knew what was wrong. You knew that the system somehow, the institutionalized system around you that you had no almost input or control over as a little kid was failing each other, right? And you saw that, and then you had this sensibility inside you that says, like, I may not know much, but I know someday I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to do something, right? And that, one could argue, we could paint a pretty direct picture to this is who you are now at your age that you are, which is lovely. I mean, what a moment, what an arc for any of us, right? I'm 57 and kind of going through that period of my life where, you as the kids love to say, like, kind of lose all the F's to give, right? And start to just kind of live in who we are, and appreciate the perspective we have and all those lessons. I still pull lessons from my dad. My dad would love one of the things you said earlier. My dad used to teach me, I worked for my dad, first job out of college, which was both the greatest thing ever and the worst thing ever at the same time. But one of the phrases that he stuck in me, which are just, I share now thousands of times since then, is he used to say that the best philosophy in life was give, ask.
Yeah.
Right. And it was always about, you give twice as much as you ask for, give twice more before you ask for anything, right? Like, be there for others in service of others, which was one of the curiosities that made me want to pull you into this conversation today, is that I look at your background and I know of what I know of you from what I hear from people that I trust and respect about you. And there was always this thread of, like, service to others. And, little Arturo back in the day was thinking, someday I'm going to grow up to do that. 1,500 entrepreneurs, executives, right? Leaders now. Are we seeing shifts in the demographics, right? Like, I've had the good fortune to have a lot of guests on the show over the years, and I have worked in the past with a lot of organizations. In fact, like, little shout out, we're creating a new podcast. We've been hired to produce a podcast for an organization here in LA that is economic development, entrepreneurship support, and they focus almost exclusively on women, brown and black skinned women entrepreneurs, right? So I'm curious, like, I didn't get to talk about the demographics of LBAN, right? I would imagine when it started, it was probably mostly Latino men. And now it's probably less just men, and it's probably more diverse diaspora. Can you give us some insights into that? And kind of, if you've seen it trending, are we seeing more Daniela Carvelinos show up than we used to?
Yeah. So we do, we would like more women to apply to the program. Okay. Because of the criteria we have, it's only a subset of women, compared to men, will just objectively qualify. But there's plenty of women out there with the talent. And our goal is to try to get to 50-50. Okay. Because until we're there, we're kind of part of the problem, right? We're perpetuating
respect for recognizing, right? Is that a stated goal inside the program? Like, by 2030, we want to be at 50-50, or is it just an aspirational thing?
It's more the aspirational, in part because we have to be careful not to have, like,
of course,
too much of an explicit.
Yeah. Hey, anybody that's listening from the government, these are my words, not his.
Yeah, but we are we do see huge value in that, and we have seen the numbers reflect that, in part just because we try to show up more where women are present, so that we make it more accessible. But the other thing, in terms of, like, the change that we've seen, we do see more tech companies, right? And that's probably because more Latinos are getting into tech, sure, but also because our accelerator is our newest program. We didn't have one until a few years ago. We added it, and there's a big need there. And so that one, as people now found out about it, it's oversubscribed. But we're always open to more people. We want to have a representation of people from across the country. I think now we have like 39 states. So
wonderful.
There's still like 11 out there that we need to get to.
It's almost crazy to think that you haven't gotten to those 11 yet. No, thank you. And thanks for indulging me on that. That was a question that was eating at me, and I forgot to ask it earlier, so I appreciate that. All right, last question before we get you out of here, because you've got an afternoon ahead of you. I appreciate this much time that you've given us. you're meeting these business owners at various points in their journeys, right? But I'm sure part of what motivates them to apply in the first place is that at some point, right, they're overwhelmed by it all, right? They're overwhelmed by the leadership responsibilities. They're overwhelmed by what they have to do on their task list, which always has 100 items on it every day. If you could, little business MBA class 101 here for 2 minutes, right? If we could say to that overwhelmed business owner who's maybe coming into LBAN and sign up for LBAN can't be the answer to this question, right? Like coming into LBAN, like what are 2 or 3 of the next things that they need to focus on doing, like tactical or strategic? Like when you're overwhelmed and you're swimming in it and your business is kind of going willy-nilly and you think, oh my God, I should sign up for a program like LBAN because I need some help. Before we even get there, like today, you have a chance to give these people a little short roadmap on what are the next 2 or 3 things that they should calm themselves and focus on to try and pull themselves out of that.
Well, so I will say that when people are in that situation, they're not thinking about signing up for LBAN, right? 'Cause
You're right. You're probably right.
they're yeah, and actually, when we do find people in the application process where they reach out, but they have that doubt of, hey, then they'll basically describe what you just said. Hey, I'm going through this, whatever, and I don't know if I have the time. And now I do think it's precisely the time. Not if it's not LBAN, it is the time to get connected to other people because other people will help ground you, and getting those other voices because perhaps you probably can't, for other obvious reasons, like relate all your issues and challenges with the team, right? Because
right, no, of course.
And so you need to have that network, or you need to have at least others that know enough about what you're doing. And what happens for a lot of people when especially if you're from a non-traditional background in business, you probably in your family or just in your circles, you don't have as many people that are business owners that are that connected to you, right? And so getting connected to find, because any other networks can provide that. It doesn't have to be LBAN.
Yeah, so like plug in your community or your industry, like look to plug into other peers, advisors, mentors, leaders, people that you could just reach out and go like, man, I'm struggling. Maybe you can give me some insights.
Yeah, exactly. And then one of the challenges I do think people are facing, like especially if you're Latino these days, or probably even Asian Americans, with what's going on in the country, there's a sense sometimes of like you're under attack or you're under threat, and also being part of a group helps with that, right? Because I mean,
plug in a community because sometimes you really need community.
Exactly. And so I think that for a lot of reasons, that's what I would encourage people. I know that takes time, but making that time matters because you'll regain your sanity, your ability to focus. Actually, it will help you process what you're going through.
Yeah. And as you said earlier too, right? Like as I was watching you, I thought to myself, like when you said be centered and be focused, I was like, oh, literally like box breathing, like, okay, let's calm ourselves down. Right.
Yeah.
So part of it is that like, calm yourself down, reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help and talk to others around you in your community, plug into relationships so you can offload some of this stuff, and then just calm yourself down, take a breath, take a beat, right? Remember who you are and how you got there, and then lean back into it. It's wonderful advice. Arturo, this has been a pleasure. I didn't tell you this. I've secretly wanted to have someone from leadership at LBAN on this show for like 4 years. So the fact that you graciously helped me to make that happen, I'm selfishly very excited and grateful for that. But also I'm a huge believer from afar and kind of adjacently because of the relationships that I have. Like I'm deeply aware of LBAN and have been a fan from afar from a long time. So to hear it firsthand from you, which is like hearing it from Dr. Porras, by extension, I'm grateful for the work that you guys do. I'll just say this, it's my show. I get to compliment you if I want, right? I'm proud that a lot of good people that I know are surrounding themselves with good people that you know in your community. And I absolutely am a believer in the statistical inevitability of what the future of the country's economy looks like if we can figure out more ways to support and encourage and nurture our Latino entrepreneurs in specific. So grateful for you. Is there anything, are there things we should point people towards, websites, social media handles, like all that stuff where we could connect people to?
Yeah, and so we're up on LinkedIn and
Awesome.
Insta, all that. But I would say on our website, if you go to our website, which is LBAN.US, our website will have information about our 2 programs. If you're a business owner, startup founder, and you want to learn about those, and we're recruiting year round, right?
Awesome.
So the application's there, information is there. You can also reach out. We're happy to talk to anyone who has questions.
Cool.
And again, we're open to everyone. The other thing is that every year we have a summit at Stanford that we organize with Stanford on the research. And you'd think research that's boring. No, it's a party. It is a party. It's 1,000 people. We have we have panel discussions. It's
1,000 really smart, passionate Latinos. Come on. Of course it's a party.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's open to the public. Everyone's welcome. And we don't charge for the summit at all. It's at Stanford. So, Northern California, but, people fly in for it. But yeah, that'll happen at the end of March, every year.
That's
and again,
awesome.
Information on our website, everything's
Terrific.
there.
And we're recording this at the beginning of March. It'll come out sometime the end of March or early April. So put that around the context of you, the listeners and viewers. Again, Arturo, it was an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful. I thank you. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
I did. No, I very much appreciate it, Rob. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.